Hey guys, welcome back to the Garod restoration project. Yeah, if it wasn't clear in my initial video on this set, I do intend to donate it, but I intend to restore it before I donate it with the help of some colleagues at the Early Television Museum. So my real plan here is to do a preliminary checkout, ideally get a raster on it, and then finish off the work at the museum, do the fine-tuning, maybe finish some of the recapping, and so on. I don't want to just bring it over there cold and expect us to do it all in a day or two. That's a bit too demanding. Plus, I don't want to run into a problem where there's something difficult to replace that's bad. So, I've done a few things. Actually, I pretty quickly figured out what the model is on this and the name. I didn't realize the Early Television Museum website had a page devoted to Garod and had a number of ads showing all the models. So this is a 15TZ6 known as the Sherman. I just started taking a little bit of a look at the chassis. This thing is very well made, but also rather complex and compact and a little daunting, I gotta admit. I gotta be a little careful working on it too for a few reasons that make it a little even more challenging to work on. So we have an AM loop antenna sticking out on one side. We don't want to bust that off. It's already cracked a little here. Not for me. It looks like it's actually maybe from when it was made or something, because it's kind of frozen in that position. But I think we'd be best off disconnecting it and taking these off and putting it aside for safekeeping. Bigger issue is all this stuff. So I was having so much trouble getting this out of the cabinet. The CRT socket, the deflection yoke, the focus coil, they're all hardwired into the chassis. They just go right down through holes in it. They don't unplug. And the insulation's already starting to crack on these wires from being flexed. So again, ideally disconnect them while working on it. But of course, you can't power it up to try things out until you hook it all back up. So that could get old real quick. Might be best to rig up some kind of connector for them. And I'm starting to feel my way around the chassis a little bit too, because there are some oddities to it. Big old power transformer. We have a 5U4 and I believe a 5Y3, but if that's a real old school type 5Y3. And then we got the flyback just sitting right up here, right out in the open, right in the middle with no shield. So here's our high voltage output. Here's our high voltage rectifier. I believe that's how it was made. I don't see any missing shield or provisions for where you would install a box over this, so that's just how they did it. Looks like it's the standard flyback used in all the early black and white TVs, so if it's bad, I probably have a dozen of these. The most common flyback by far, so that's not a problem. There's a lot going on though, so let's just start by taking a look at the front of this. We got a lot of controls, not just the ones that are accessible to the user, but then a whole bunch up here for making adjustments. But they're all labeled, which is nice. Don't understand necessarily what they all mean, like horizontal peaking. This got to be expanded vertical size, horizontal centering, focus. So the expanded size, just like the Zenith porthole Stromberg Carlson I've done in the past. This has a provision for a switch that would expand the picture to fill up the whole circle, stretch it vertically, in other words. So yeah, we have vertical linearity, expanded vertical linearity, vertical centering, vertical size. I do not have that switch. They do occasionally come up for sale, so maybe someday. Here's the channel selector. I like how they indicate on here what channel it is. It looks like we're not actually locked in. There we go. It rotates pretty smoothly. I imagine the center here is fine-tuning. We have our radio dial. Dial string is not broken, which is always a big plus. It's this guy right here. AM and FM. Glass dial scale is in excellent shape. We want to be very careful not to break that again. It might be best to remove it. Dial light on either side, super crusty. Would quite likely be bad. We got all kinds of controls down here. I assume that'll be horizontal and vertical hold, brightness, contrast, probably tone, mode. Who knows what else? We have more controls than we need because some of these are concentric. So I have to look back at the panel or servers info to figure out what all of these are for. Right behind that we have the radio chassis, which is a little sub-chassis here. Got our variable tuner. I assume that plate with just two suctions there is going to be for the FM. And these will be for the AM. Right behind that we have a whole mess of electrolytic caps. We have 5 here, and 2 more for a total of 7 multi-section electrolytic capacitors. Yeah, this is a higher end set, so lots of caps. That is almost guaranteed to be a replacement because it has that stripe around it, Sprague, very likely. The rest appear to be original. And notice all of these are mounted on phenolic wafers, so my immediate thought is we use Adaptacaps on these. As they'll just drop right into those holes if we pop these out. Make quick work of that. Whole lot of miniature tubes. I haven't done a full tube count on this, but it's certainly up there. Mostly miniatures. Don't have a whole lot of 6S7s and similar type tubes. So we have our 2 big rectifiers, our horizontal output tube. It's probably a damper tube. Oh, I see. So that's the 5Y3. So this big old Coke bottle here, that's got to be the 5V4 damper tube. And a couple, probably 6, maybe 3 6S7s. Maybe 4, okay. I guess they're more than I realized. 6 AC7, probably the video output. And then here's all the IF type stuff. Here's our tuner. 3 tubes on it. It's a very RCA looking coil. I noticed a few RCA parts in this. So for example, it's got an RCA yoke. So I suspect they licensed some of this design stuff from RCA. That's an RCA type flyback as well. One thing that puzzled me immediately when I saw it is that. What is this black can up on top here? It's not a capacitor, so my immediate thought was, well, a transformer, and yeah, that I do believe is the vertical oscillator blocking transformer. And I think that is the horizontal oscillator blocking transformer. I really hope both of them are good. If they're not, I've seen some modifications where you can bypass the transformer and use more like an RC type coupling feedback circuit. As it's not at all uncommon for these to be bad, and they can be a little tricky to track on replacements, but there are workarounds. Alright, so that's all that. It's also very dirty, very dusty, I should say. Not much corrosion, but there's a really thick layer of white kind of powder dust over everything, so needs a good cleaning. Alright, let's take a peek underneath. Which is a bit easier said than done. Is like most TV chassis, it's a horrible combination of very heavy, very unwieldy, and very delicate and fragile. We have this huge power transformer in one corner making that a bit unstable, and there's stuff sticking out here and there. Like I can't rest it on this side, it'll bust that antenna. So I just kind of hold it here at a bit of an angle. First thing that hit me is there are far fewer paper caps than I expected. So this will be the tuner IF stuff. There aren't any. There are just 1 or 2 there as we start getting away from it. Now it may look to you like, oh, it's all burned up there, but remember that's the high voltage circuit in the middle. That's the high voltage rectifier socket we're looking at. That's a very fine dust, soot that's been attracted by the static high voltage, so that'll just clean right off. It's nothing burned up. Doesn't really look like much of any work was done down here. Now we get a bit of this area. There are power resistors mounted to the chassis, so this will be the power supply area. I'll double check those. Might be best to just preemptively replace them. Oh, that's kind of nifty. I think that's a paper cap with copper foil around it that's grounded, forming a little shield around it, kind of like a feed-through capacitor. Ooh, and, oh. Okay, I take back what I said about nothing having burned up. That electrolytic capacitor burned up and spewed its innards out, and if it was running, maybe the soot from that burning up got attracted to the high voltage, and that's where it got deposited. Alright, let's get to it. I just carefully unsoldered 2 wires going to the loop antenna, and I unmounted it. I'm going to put this aside for safekeeping. I'll poke around the chassis a little bit more. Have not discovered anything that concerns me. The Sam's photo fact for this and the original service manual, which I do believe covers this, is available for free download from the Early Television Museum website, but I also ordered up a hard copy of the Sam's. I saw one on eBay at a reasonable price. I figure I'm going to be working on this for a while, so it's nice to have the 3-page fold-out original schematic, so that should be arriving very shortly. I also went to the parts list on the Sam's, and I saw what's involved, and it's nothing too out of the ordinary, but there are a lot of caps. So I noted earlier that these electrolytics, a lot of these are just 1 section, maybe 2 section, but there are a lot of axial electrolytics scattered around. There's about 8, maybe 10 of them underneath the chassis as well. So if you add all that together, there are quite a few electrolytic caps in this. So what do I want to do next? Well, I started just doing a little bit of cleaning. So there's this white dust over everything. I've got a comment saying, is that asbestos? No, I'm pretty sure it's not. Asbestos is fibrous. This is just a very fine powder. This is in somebody's basement for decades, and it was in a laundry area, so this could just be fluff for the dryer or whatever. And actually, it actually smells nice, which is a nice change of pace, because it was in an area where there's a lot of, well, you know, scented detergents and whatnot. And it was I was in a dry basement that was partially finished, so that accounts for it being good condition, 0 corrosion whatsoever. Well, what I am curious to try, that I've had really good luck with on other chassis, is try a little bit of CLR. I'm just curious to see how well this might clean up. I think the largest area of accessible metal is right here, so let me rotate this around a little bit. And I'm sure some of you think this is ridiculous, certainly at this stage, or maybe at any stage, but considering how easy this is to do and how nice it generally works, I just got into the habit of doing it. So it's a little bit of CLR, calcium lime rust remover. It's for removing stains from, well, porcelain sinks and whatnot. And yeah, that's usually the kind of results I get. So rather than bothering to clean off the dust and then do various stages of cleaning, I'm just going right into it with the CLR. So I'm getting off both the dust and the metal corrosion in one shot. Now see, there's some spots where it's really shiny poking through. If I let it sit longer, get a little more aggressive with it, I bet it will all look like that. So grab a brush. Bought about 100 little brushes off of Amazon the other day for doing detail work like this. So we'll just let that sit a little bit. Also starting to clean the tubes up. Now that is a little bit more practical because At some point we're going to try powering this up, and I want to see if the tubes are glowing, and we'll also be testing the tubes at some point. Both of which are easier if you can actually see the filament glowing inside. So this will be a 5U4, nice looking RCA, not the original, so that was replaced at some point. Pretty sure the horizontal output tube has also been replaced. These electrolytics are Solar brand. It's a little unusual to see in a TV. Usually they're Mallory or OEM. Rather hefty power transformer. Now, at first, when I saw that there was a 5Y3 and a 5U4, I figured there wouldn't be a lot of power resistors forming voltage dividers because they have two separate power rails. There actually are a bunch of power resistors. I think they're right in this area. Bunch of 7-10 watt power resistors. I think all told, there's 8 or so rather large wire wound power resistors, so they are definitely burning off a lot of juice that's coming out. Alright, let's see how this is doing. Did not clean it too well. It's almost like there's a waxy buildup on it. I just use my fingernail and it comes right off. So I think a different cleaning product is in order if we really want to get that clean. Oh, you know what that might be, because as we saw, one of these cabs vented pretty aggressively and another one also vented, maybe not quite as bad. That crud may have settled down on this. Maybe they burned a lot of candles around this or something like that, but there's some kind of weird buildup on this. Let's try a little alcohol on it. Let's try some simple green first, and if that doesn't work, go to some lacquer thinner. Part of the reason I'm doing this too is just because I can see how nice the metal is, and this whole thing should be gleaming silvery metal if all goes well. Yeah, no, I didn't think this was going to do anything. That needs to be dissolved off with something a little more aggressive. So let's pop open this lacquer thinner and give it a try. I promise you we will get to electronics. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. That's why I'm doing this. Looks like a mirror. Alright, fumes will be a bit much. But, yeah, nice. So yeah, this is cadmium plated, but you know what? Whatever was on here blocked it from getting corroded. So we don't have the usual white or yellow cadmium oxide or cadmium sulfide buildup. It's just got this coating. The sides are corroded. That's why I was expecting the top to be. You can see at the side here how it's it's so heavy. How it's yellowy on the side. That'll come off with the CLR, and it's going to smell like rotten eggs when I do. But not this top surface. Sweet. Another reason I'm doing this is I am going to be using Adaptacaps. It's going to make short work of this. It's going to look really nice, and I have some potential news about Adaptacaps too. I'll tell you more about that when my latest order arrives shortly. So what are Adaptacaps? They're little circuit boards that make it easy to replace caps, especially when they are mounted on these isolating phenolic wafers. These holes line up exactly where the original ones did, and you can mount your new electrolytics in the provided holes. And if you can get these cardboard covers off, you can just slip those right over your new caps and hide them inside. But what about the metal ones? Well, we'll talk about that a bit later. So that'll take care of all 5 of these. Easy peasy. The other two are mounted a little bit differently, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. Now, because I can see two of these are just absolutely shot, they lost their guts, we're not going to try powering this up until those get replaced. But my plan is to do a control power up before we replace everything. But I will very likely replace all 5 of these caps before I try a power up. So I'm going to continue so I mentioned doing cleaning, so I'm using the adapter caps because I want to clean around here. Or when I get these out, I want to clean up this whole area, make it nicer to work on for sure. Controls are all a bit dirty too. And there, so when I showed the underside of the chassis, I got comments, hey boy, that looks really clean, there aren't that many parts. There are more parts scattered around. So if we look behind the control cluster here, we've got power resistors and we have electrolytics and we have paper caps. So there's some up in this area and on the other side as well, though not quite as many. So it's also a rather large chassis. So if you add it all up, it has about as many paper caps as a typical TV of this era normally would. Just double checking around the high voltage stuff to see if maybe there really was a high voltage cover and I just missed the mounting points. But no, I'm pretty sure there's never had one. That's just the way they made them. At least the positive high voltage output goes below the chassis, and that's isolated from prying fingers. But the other side of the cap is right there. Yeah, you would get a heck of a jolt if you touch that. Weird. I'm also surprised it's not just covered in fuzz and just junk, because this set seems to be fairly high hour. With all this being exposed, you would think that it would just have this layer like that of all of stuff that got attracted by the static electricity. But I'm not complaining. Alright, well, I'm gonna continue on with, oh yeah, let's try using the CLR on the side here. I want to prop it up a bit so you can see better. I can't put this chassis completely on its side because there's cables and stuff sticking out. So let's lift her up, prop her up. Yes, I do actually have some metal coffee cans. Not sure when they stopped using them, but it's been a few years. Here's the CLR rag I was using earlier. I'll put a little more on it. So like this yellowy here, that is, I'm sure, cadmium sulfide. Yeah, it takes a little while. Well, the worse the corrosion is, the longer it takes. There's that sulfur rotten egg smell. Hydrogen sulfide, I imagine, or something like that. But yeah, it's working. If you really want to be insane after this, take some Simichrome or Noxon or some other metal polish, and you could go over the sides. I do call cadmium poor man's chrome. Is it toxic? Yeah, but it doesn't get absorbed through your skin. You would need to ingest it or inhale dust. And we aren't doing either. This is damp. It's going onto the rag. If you're concerned, of course, wear some gloves. Yeah, it does a very nice job. In the past, I used more aggressive. I used like diluted navel jelly, hydrochloric acid, but CLR. It's not an industrial chemical. It's made for cleaning your sinks to get like rust stains off of porcelain. So, you know, it's not heavy duty. All right, cool. Here's a good example of why I like to clean and do a thorough examination before bothering to try powering it up or troubleshoot. 6BG6 looks okay from this side. Take it out, turn it around. Yeah. I think that's gone to air, or it's fried, or both. So I'm pretty darn sure this is a bad tube. So if I had left that in and tried doing a Variac power up and all that, I could be scratching my head why there's no high voltage when I'm pretty sure that tube is shot. I'm going to put it back in there for now just to attach that lead, continue on, but remember to replace that or test it first and see if it's really bad. Now, we saw the caps vented, so I probably really slammed the rectifier tubes hard. 5U4, it's a 5U4 GB, which is a later, more rugged version. This is an RCA, especially tall for some reason, a lot of space between the base and the bottom of the plates. There is some flaked off cathode material. See some white flakes in there, so that's somewhat concerning. It's not a death sentence necessarily, but not a great sign either. Let's check the 5Y3 just visually. Of course, I'll check these on a tube tester, but if you can see that there's something visibly shot inside, you can save yourself the trouble of even bothering with the tube tester. Alright, I will continue on. That's the only problem I've seen so far. Well, with that antenna unmounted, I was able to safely rest the chassis on that side, and I can get a really good look into this area. And to steal a phrase, it is baked. Yeah, so this cap really badly vented. The phenolic base of the cap is bulged out, it's cracked, there's goo, charredness all over, and at least two others are in really bad shape. This one up here, it's a little obscured by a paper cap, but it has oozed goo as well, and that one down there has as well. So I suspect some of this, what we're seeing over here, is from that venting, because this would have been high voltage and it would have attracted the stuff as it vented out. This area is power supply and some horizontal output circuits, some bleeder resistors, a lot of heat, I am going to replace these power resistors. The chassis mount one's a little pricey, but the enamel is flaking off. They look to be in rough shape. So we got a lot of work to do in this area. And yes, there is a relay down here. I believe it's 4 sections. This is for the zoom feature. It has a remote control. It just has one button on it. All that button does is energize this relay coil, which closes 4 switches, which changes some of the characteristics of the vertical output stage. I believe it only stretches it vertically. I don't think it modifies it horizontally. Unlike the Stromberg Carlson I did a while ago with the opera glass feature, which stretched it both horizontal and vertically. I think this is just vertical, but that is what that relay is for. Hopefully it is still good. Now what I was planning on doing, I might hold off a little bit until I check this out more, was to pull the rectifier tubes and power it up just to make sure we get tube glowing, that the power transformer isn't toast. We got some wax coming out of it, but I don't think it's too bad. There are a couple caps across the AC line to ground. I think it's these two guys, and they are bulging. In general, the wax caps look really rough in this. So I know a lot of folks aren't in favor of shotgunning rather than versus troubleshooting, but this set is degraded enough. I think I will be doing quite a bit of parts replacement before attempting a first full power up. Let's switch gears and look at the service info for a bit. This is a scan courtesy of the Early Television Museum of the original Garod. Service info, which does cover models 10TZ1 through 15TZ6, which is what this is. And this was their slogan for these sets with the zoom feature. Garod television with telezoom, it is tellerific. That is accomplished via It's on here somewhere. A relay. It's definitely a case where the SAMS is a bit easier to read, I think, than the OEM info, but there is the push button. It actually hooks up to connectors right next to the antenna, okay. And then all it is a push button. It energizes a relay, and the switches are sort of scattered around. And the vertical circuit, we have one switch here, we have another one there, and I'm not sure where the other two are, but it is a 4-section relay. But let's flip over to the power supply for a bit, down here in the bottom right corner, which is not exactly the standard place to put it, but that's where it is. So, line coming in here, those two AC line caps I want to just remove for now. They're oozing, very likely to pop, because they aren't just, it's not just the cap from either side of the AC line to ground, because they're connected together, so really you have the AC line across both of them. We don't want that to pop. You can certainly power up this side without them. They're there to filter noise off the line. Not critical to the operation, but you don't want to have one of those vent in your face. Alright, so here we are, the 5U4 and the 5Y3. A little tough to read. It's not really much better on the SAMs in this area, but there are two caps here. An 80 and an 80, 350 volt in series. The Dumont RA103 did exactly the same thing. I think even the same values, which kind of makes a 700 volt cap. They didn't use any equalizing resistors though, so unless these are perfectly matched capacitors, that voltage is not going to divide evenly. I would not want to put a full 700 volts across that, but that's why they did that. On the other side of the choke, they got 500 working volts. Yeah, the choke will limit the power on surge. So this cap can use a lesser voltage. It also do have a 650 ohm resistor right off the 5U4, so it'll limit some of that surge as well. This does not have a time delay relay. So, at any rate, so these are those caps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and most of these are single section. So those cans we see mounted up there just have one cap inside of some of them. Which makes my life easier as far as replacing them goes. I had a discussion with a viewer the other day about early high voltage rectifiers on my Patreon, and he sent me a good article about it, the development of the 1B3, and I think he had dug up a photo of an 8016, or sorry, 8016. That's what they called 1B3s before they were 1B3s. I think during the war or pre-war they were 8016 was a designator. I think I have a few lying around. Next time I come across it, I'll try to pull it out and show it to you guys, and we can check out the differences. They tweaked the construction over time to constantly improve them. It was a workhorse high voltage rectifier for years. Anyways, this was kind of odd. I haven't actually seen this in a chassis, but supposedly this is a 6AR5 for the vertical output tube. I've never seen that tube used there before. Here's our 6SN7 vertical oscillator with that blocking transformer. That's the one on top, that black can. We want to make sure that that is good. They don't show resistance readings here. Kind of annoying. And the horizontal also uses a blocking transformer, so we cross our fingers again that both of those are still good. You know what? There is a switch in the horizontal. I was mistaken, so it does zoom in both directions. Alright. Alright. So that's where the other two switch sections are. They're in the horizontal. Good. Otherwise, you'd just be stretching everybody vertically and it would look very distorted. So that is a true zoom feature. So there's our challenge. A little bit more complicated power supply with the two rectifiers, a bunch of filter caps, Generally, the layout of the circuit, or the functional blocks are the same as any other set, but some peculiarities like that 6AR5 vertical output tube. Took it to Sam's for a bit. It's certainly a cleaner scan, so easier to read. And they both incorporate the AM/FM radio right into the TV schematic. So here we can see the power supply with the two caps in series. This being broken up over 3 pages, yeah, it's larger, easier to read, but you got to stitch those pages together or it's really hard to follow. Calm down. This does have horizontal and vertical centering controls with 1,000 microfarad caps. There's more electrolytics. Those are the ones mounted underneath. So yeah, we got a lot of caps. There are quite a few caps like this too, like 4 microfarad, 8 microfarad. Just single axial electrolytics are scattered around all over underneath for some additional filtering. I'm expecting good performance out of this set, that's for sure. With all this extra circuitry, and it does have DC restoration. It's one of those caps, 10 microfarad, 8 microfarad. It's going to take some work, that's for sure. I didn't see any point in holding back, so I just yanked all 5 of these caps out. And boy, are they miserable. These are not getting reformed. And here is what's left behind. Look at that lovely shielded wiring soldered right to the chassis for grounding. Also notice how clean it is over here. Yeah, lacquer thinner took all that gunk right off. This high voltage deck unmounts, so I'll be able to clean all up around in there easily. I did start checking power resistors, and this one's measuring strangely, and it sure looks like a replacement to me. It should be 17.5K. That should be 10K. It measures close to it, but they're just so miserable. I'm going to replace them anyways. Now, if you haven't shopped around for 25-watt enamel chassis mount resistors, you might be in for a little sticker shock. They're about 10 bucks a pop. Oddball values, adjustable ones, even more. So 17.5, not a standard value. I do happen to have a 20K 20 watt on hand though, so I'm going to parallel something up with it to get to 17.5. I'll order up a new 10K, and the rest are 7 watts or less, and they're all axial. I'll replace all those too. Now, a colleague of mine who's associated with the museum did talk to the owner, and he did accept this donation. Said they have limited display area, so we'll have to see when I get there what's going to get moved to make room for this. He thinks they have a Garod there, but it's not working. A lot of sets there don't work, unfortunately. So I think that's one reason he wanted to get this, is to have a working one. Now, they don't leave the sets on 24/7. They have my motion detectors or timers, but during the week, during business hours, and people are visiting, yeah, they do run sets, and so I don't really want to cut corners on this. It's a really nice set, it's really well made. I think it'll look really cool. I also noticed that the museum's inventory of cathode ray tubes, they have 4 new, I presume, or good, strong 16 LP4s and 1 used 16 LP4, all of which should work with this set. So I have one myself in storage that's used. It's not that great, but when I bring this set there, I think I'll ask if we can pull one out and try to find a new old stock one to pop into this set to make everything extra nice. So I think this is a good place to leave off here. I'm going to keep going through this. I'm building up an order with Mauser or DigiKey. We'll see who's got a better selection of what I need. And I'll continue cleaning. When we pick up, hopefully some parts will arrive, and we can start doing some work, including a limited power-up. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.